my gosh, here we are at it again. I can't believe it. I'm well past the 7.5 year mark. I'm closing in on 8 years. This July will be 8 years that I've been hosting this show. I love that I get to meet really interesting people. In fact, without any further delay, let me tell you about this week's guest. Today's guest exemplifies the power of resilience and the transformative capacity of financial literacy. A trailblazer in personal finance, she has turned her challenging beginnings in Section 8 housing and a childhood marked by poverty and abuse into a celebrated career spanning over 25 years. She's a serial entrepreneur with many accomplishments, including managing a top 10 REMAX office with over $2 billion in sales 5 consecutive years, and founding and later selling a successful insurance agency. As a best-selling author and the charismatic host of the rapidly growing Empower Her Money podcast, she is dedicated to empowering women and closing the poverty gap through financial education and personal empowerment. Her mission is to inspire and instill hope, demonstrating unequivocally that anyone can rise above their circumstances and achieve greatness. Please join me in welcoming Angela Duncan. Welcome, Angela.
So good to be here. Thank you so much.
You're joining us from your place in Miami, Florida. Love visiting there. And thanks to technology, we're able to have this conversation. As you know, this show is about building strong networks, but the context is leadership. So tell me, how do you define leadership, and when did you realize you had the skills to lead?
Yeah. So leadership to me is someone that is taking charge, not necessarily by a title, but other people are following. And so I don't think that I necessarily still believe that I'm a true leader, but I'm in a space, I've been in this space for a long time. I have a lot of knowledge to teach. And so I kind of view myself as a teacher, not necessarily a leader.
Ooh, we have to dig into this because if I invited you on the show, I'm going to tell you, you're doing something good in the world and you're a leader. And by even by your own definition, are people following you?
Yes.
You can't have followers without a leader. So there you go. I will now anoint you by the power invested in me as a leader. So welcome to the world of leadership. It's a lot of responsibility.
Yes,
So
it is.
I want to take you back a little bit because, in the intro, you had quite a marked beginning. I always ask my guests about their early days on the playground. What kind of kids were they? Were they organizing their groups of friends? Were they kind of sitting back? Did teachers see potential in them? Like who was in their life? And so what was that story like for you in those early sort of primary school, elementary school years?
Yeah. So I think as a kid, I was like the fly on the wall. I observed first. And then when I spoke, it was intentional. And so I wasn't one of those very social butterflies wanting to make friends with everyone. I just observed first. And then if I had a project or working on a team project, in school, then I would insert my opinion when I thought it was necessary. And so I do believe that that carries on into my adulthood. I'm a little bit more social now than I used to be. But as a kid, I really was just an observant, very curious, asking tons of questions and really trying to figure out the simplest way and the best, most effective way to get things done.
So I'm guessing you weren't like a leadership role in any kind of clubs, and you didn't like run for student body president or anything like that. How did you sort of show up? Were you, because you were so curious, was that something that your teachers maybe paid attention to and appreciated?
Yeah, and I've always been the overachiever. If I believe that if you're going to get something done, I'm going to put 100%. I even say that today. I only have two gears. Either I'm not moving in your direction or I'm full speed ahead. And that's the only way I know how to work. And I think that was very evident as a child too. When I wanted to work on something, I definitely put in a ton of effort and made sure that I got it done correctly.
And where did you grow up?
All over the place. You talked about my childhood in poverty. We moved around a ton. I like to say I'm from San Diego because I lived there the longest, but I lived in 8 different states before the age of 15.
That's a lot of moving and a lot of reestablishing yourself. Did you feel like maybe later in life there were some skill sets you learned by having to constantly readjust into a new social environment?
Yeah, I do believe the curiosity piece, when you're curious and you ask people about questions, then they start to feel like you're very interested in them. And then they open up, they become my friends. But instead of talking about me first, I really want to focus on you And I feel like that really helps me as we moved around a lot to kind of create friendships all over.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really difficult skill set for some people to learn, even later in life. And it can serve really well as a leader because you're willing to hear what other people have to say and you show interest in them. And then they want to participate and share their talents with you. So, I think that anyone who's had that kind of moving around upbringing has a different sort of worldview also, because I imagine the places you lived, there were some differences. So, did you start to understand? I mean, I feel like when you grow up in one space, like everything exists in a certain way. Like that's just how it is. But you must have seen that not everything was always the same way. Like, was there an example or two you can think of that made you realize, oh, we don't always do X?
Yeah, but I think still growing up in poverty, even though the states were different,
Mhm.
people and mindset and the way things were done were very similar.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
when you see it across different platforms like that, different states, different areas, you don't know any different. And until you can kind of be exposed to a different way and understand that there is a better way to live, some people get stuck in that poverty mindset and that poverty cycle. And unfortunately, they keep repeating it for their own family life. And until someone else steps in and kind of has that light bulb where you get curious, it's hard to get out of that same cycle, unfortunately.
So when you were 12, did you have a sense of your next 10 years? Like, were there any givens or assumptions, or was it really left to you to figure out what your life would look like going forward?
Yeah, I think it kind of hit me in high school. When I started seeing kids, I remember very distinctly, I had this one girl in high school. I was not friends with her, but for her 16th birthday, there was a car in the parking lot with a bow on it. And I kept thinking, like, why not me? What are they doing differently in their life that my family didn't do? And how do I get to their level? And again, it just becomes that curiosity. And I didn't really ask a ton of questions in high school. It was more of the observer. But once I hit college and I started working in the banking field, I had people around me that I could ask questions to. And so often we are afraid to ask for help or ask questions. And that's a key piece for me when we are learning and we're growing. And I think that's a key, aspect of being a leader is being curious and always developing and learning and becoming the better version of ourselves. So I do think I was fortunate in the banking world to have those mentors around me. But if I hadn't taken that first step to, kind of get in contact with them, to ask questions, to be part of their world and let them know that I'm curious and like, how can I help you? You're going to help me with information, but I want to be able to help you too. And that really started, I think, on my leadership role, switching from that observant person to now taking action, asking questions, and then implementing what I was learning.
I would definitely want to come back to this piece about sort of how do you find and develop mentors, because that sounds like what you were able to do. But how was college achieved? Because it sounds like money was tight. There were no assumptions about, well, for 17 generations, we've always done X. So how, you must have had a certain fortitude to figure out a way forward for that. What made you want to go to college? Like, why was that a dream of yours? And then what was the focus when you went to college? Was there a particular plan that you had for like what you would study or who you wanted to be?
Yeah, I think in high school, the teachers taught you go to college. I'm 45 years old. So this was a little bit ago where people didn't really think about just jumping into entrepreneurship. So in high school, teachers always said, get good grades, go to college. So that's where the idea came from. Now, I did end up on the 5-year plan. I went to community college first and then transferred to the 4-year university. Cost wise, it was a much better option. I worked 3 jobs, 7 days a week, trying to fit the college schedule in between that, and just knowing that it's okay that I didn't finish in 4 years. It's okay that for me, I didn't join a sorority. I am not talented enough to play sports, but I wanted that degree. I wanted that information. And I knew that if I got to that point, at least that would be my next step in my journey. But having the education piece was important to me.
Such a different way to approach higher learning, where you are the one paying your way quite literally and taking everything so much more seriously than a lot of students, particularly traditional students that are like, just on someone else's dime and they're doing a lot of exploring. Did you end up with a finance degree? Is that the direction you went?
I did. And if I look back at it, I wish I would have taken a little bit of time off in college because you get to only do that once, right? I'm not a college sports fan because I never went to games, never played games. And so some of that aspect I wouldn't recommend working maybe as much as I did. But for me, it was necessary to get the
Yeah.
college degree. So, that's the way it was. And I've just learned now that I enjoy life much more than I used to give myself a chance to.
Well, I am part of the 5-year club as well. I stayed an extra year because I got to run an after school club,
Oh,
and they gave me a budget, and I saw it as an opportunity to like run something. And yeah, I think I had 4 classes, and I did 3 in the fall and 1 in the spring just so I could be a student. Like I was like holding on to that. And then yeah, like I ended up in grad school, but I only had time took the time to apply to one. It was the school that I was an undergrad at. And it was sort of a like Hail Mary, like, am I going to get in? I don't know. I barely remember it. In fact, filling out the application, it was like in a blur because everything else was more important at that time. So I think that taking the extra time to pay for it in a way that made sense for you. And then finance, though, is an interesting degree. Like my dad grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, and he's talked about how for him there were only a few professions that he was really aware of when he was sort of young, really young, and it was professionals that came through his like lawyers and the post office people and police officers and real estate. Like he didn't have a wide understanding of what was possible. And so how did finance sort of get into your sort of world vision and become something that you pursued?
yeah, I think it was a movie. The Boiler Room. Yeah, it
Uh-huh.
just looked cool. Like I wanted to be a stockbroker on Wall Street. They drove nice cars, they had vacations, they had money. It's like I could do this. So while that was my initial journey, and I learned very quickly that I don't have the stomach or the personality to be on Wall Street, at least set me in a direction. And I started to learn in college about like the time value of money, saving earlier on your side versus saving later. What is the stock market? How do you look at stocks? But real estate kept popping in my world. I remember when I was working for the bank, I had this lady come in and she deposited like a $50,000 check. And I had never seen that much money before in my life. And I was like, what do you do? She's like, oh, honey, I'm a real estate agent. Okay, so it pops in my life, right? Then in the finance classes, there was a kid and he was driving this really nice car. And I was like, oh, are your parents rich? He's like, no, I'm in real estate. So it just kept popping into my world. And then you get curious, like, how do I learn more about this real estate thing? Because they obviously figured something out.
I love that pop culture and these like random pop-up conversations, you're paying attention. Clearly the theme here is that you are very observant and curious, but you're also good at following through because everything you described just to even get into college and graduate requires a tenacity, I guess is what I might call it. So did you approach real estate in a similar way, wanting to explore if that was the right fit for you? Is that your next professional step after college?
Yes. Well, I started the financial advisor route. And after I figured out that wasn't a fit for me, I did get my real estate license. And I got married in 2007, got my license in 2006. And that was right before the housing crash. So when you're in a down market like that, there's always opportunities to learn. And you have to figure out where those opportunities are and then find the clients that are looking for that opportunity. So while the market was in a very downward spiral, I didn't know any different. I wasn't part of the heyday where houses were just selling like crazy. I had to learn what are some free marketing avenues, things like Craigslist at the time, or open houses, or door knocking. All of those take effort and education to implement. But when you don't have any money, you have to look for resources that are kind of outside the box a little bit, but that you can implement in your life. And so that was the early part of my real estate career.
This overlaps a lot with how entrepreneurs need to get started as well. Because before we have budgets for marketing, we have ideas we want to pursue. And, good real estate agents or realtors are entrepreneurial and really understand that. Before the pandemic, I don't know if you know this, but I spent over a decade teaching people how to network at in-person events, and conferences back when we didn't say in person. They were just called events. No qualifier needed. And I did a talk that I would use the example of real estate agents that would walk in and just spray and pray their business card around as sort of the like, please don't do this. But I also have a couple of great examples of real estate agents that I am still in touch with. One helped me buy the house that I'm in, and one I've known for years and years, and I will always send her work. And they're both still around because they are good at developing relationships and staying in touch and being thoughtful. And I so appreciate that. And like they're like standouts because a lot of times that industry people aren't paying attention to those people skills. I feel like your observation skills coupled with your desire to really like do this yourself in this more creative grassroots way. What did you take from that maybe your peers in the real estate world were not doing? Like, were you suddenly discovering new possibilities that maybe they thought were beneath them or like not worth their time, or they'd rather spend money in other ways?
No. So one, I don't have a business card. I always want to get your business card. So that's number one, because then I've got all of your contact information. And two, after we have our conversation, I use my phone in the notes section of a contact and I put some information there. Like if they mention they're married, they have kids, they like live music, whatever it is, I'm putting it in my notes section because then when I follow up, I can build deeper in that relationship. So instead of asking someone like, what do you do for a living? I ask them, tell me something amazing that you're working on right now. And when you can tap into their heart and really ask them questions, you make that connection. And then they feel like, they already trust you and they might want to do business with you in the future. So I don't talk about me. I'm really good at just switching that light and putting it on someone else. I think that's why podcasting is so fun for me, because I do like to have the light on the person that I'm talking to. But I take notes because I'm not going to remember everything. And when I go back to talk to them, I might want to ask them a few more questions about either what they're working on or what their future goals are. Because if I can help them, I have to know them. And it's really key for me to have a system in place, such a simple, generic system, I know, but we carry our phones everywhere. So I've always got the note information with me at all times in case I run into them at an event. But now I can just keep adding to those notes too.
I have to say that, Angela, I've been hosting this show for almost 8 years, and you are the first person to mention the simplicity of tracking information in the notes on the phone contact list. And I ask all the time, like, how do you stay in touch? And I'm like, oh, do you use a CRM or a spreadsheet or stack index cards? Like, what's your process? And I'm agnostic, like if it works for you. But it's true. And I'm thinking, well, why haven't I done this? Like, my phone literally is everywhere I go. And I want to sort of be up to date with people. And I always appreciate when people remember our conversations from the past. So I hope people are making note of that because it's not expensive. You literally already are paying for a phone. And it seems like something that wouldn't require a lot of uplift to get ready. Sometimes you get a new system or CRM or something. It's super confusing, too many bells and whistles. This is really straightforward. I also know I want to get back to the conversation you were mentioning earlier about mentors. But first, I want to know, how do you make the shift from real estate to this world? Like, I now see you in like the financial literacy, empowerment, working with women. Like, what made that shift for you? And yeah, I guess the inspiration behind that.
Yeah, I'm a Christian and I believe God gives everyone a talent. And when you can kind of figure out what that talent is, and people ask me, like, how do I figure out what my talent is? I just say, what seems to come natural to you? And what are people asking questions about? And I can talk about money and investing, retirement, taxes all day long. It just rolls. But I've been studying it for 25 years. So it's not like it's something I learned overnight, but it comes very natural to me. I can do spreadsheets. I can do QuickBooks. It's natural. If you want me to come up with a marketing plan, not going to happen, not my strength. So I feel like because I understand what my talent is, it makes it easy for me to teach. And especially coming from my background, people can relate to not having money, right? So how do I teach you to get out of that cycle and just further your path and your goals? And when I come from the heart, that's what my driver is. So I know that this is the path that I'm supposed to be on. I'm kind of along for the ride, but I'm still having to take the action to better myself constantly and get more information. And that's where the networking events come into, because you learn so much from other people that if I can absorb some of that and help someone else along the way, then that's just the path that I'm supposed to be on. And I just feel very grateful to have the opportunity to be part of people's lives and to teach them more. And maybe that goes back to the leadership skills, is because I've invested that time in myself. And now I'm really helping other people. And it just is a continuation of a lifelong journey.
Are you still doing real estate? Is that still part of your overall business?
Well, yeah, my money maker, because as you probably know, podcasting doesn't make a ton of money. It's more of a passion project and how I can help other people. But yeah, I have like my full-time business that I do help people invest in real estate.
So you're not the agent so much, you are helping others understand the market and how to get into it. So you've kind of shifted from just selling people houses that they'll live in to houses they'll invest in.
Yeah, all I do is passive investments for my client at this point.
Wow. And what region are you in?
Well, I live in Miami, but our fund, we focus on the southeast part of the U.S.
That's really cool. All right. So you started a podcast about a year ago to have, I guess, a bigger platform for your message. Was there something that happened before that? Were you doing other like local conversations, gatherings, and then you're like, oh, I need to make a bigger platform?
Yeah. So talk about leadership. We'll go back to that topic. My last company I owned was an insurance company. I had built an existing company, was acquiring other insurance companies, and thought I wanted to go big with this insurance company. But what I was learning is I was failing at being a leader. I was not hiring the right people. They were not in the right spot of my bus. And I was not liking coming to my office because I knew I had to look in the mirror and I knew that I wasn't being the right leader at that moment. And this is why the business wasn't where I wanted it to be. So I ended up selling that company and I took some time off and I had to reflect and figure out, what am I good at? Where should I, implement those skill sets, and what kind of company do I want to do next? And that's where the podcast came from. Really, I was bored and I needed something to fill my time, and I wanted to teach people about money and then share other people's stories and teach about money. And I took almost a year off before joining and partnering with a new company, which I've been doing for a few months now. But I had to do a lot of self-reflection, which is really hard as a leader because you don't want to think that you're failing. But I knew that I was, and it wasn't right for the employees. It wasn't right for the clients. So I needed someone else to lead that ship and for me to take some time off to work on that skill set.
That's really hard to do, particularly if you've invested a lot of time, money, and energy into a project, to be willing to let someone else take the lead, knowing that they're a better fit, because you want the project to succeed, even if it's not with you at the helm. Like, that's a very difficult and mature leadership quality to have. How could you not think you're a leader making those kinds of big decisions? We can always get better at being leaders, but like that is a quality that is not light. It's something you earn your way into believing that that's a possibility, that you can get better, that you don't have to just stay stuck, that you can improve your own skills and improve the way you show up in the world. Any big ahas from all this introspection that you've had the last couple of years?
It was the right thing to do for the employees and for the clients. My heart is really centered around helping people grow wealth. And in the Florida insurance market, it's very tough to be able to reach people to help them with their overall wealth, right? On just a small piece of their life. And market's tough. And to fight people to save $5 because they didn't understand the coverages or they didn't want to take the time to understand the coverages, I knew that wasn't my skill set. So even though I, believe in my leadership ability, that avenue to help people with true wealth was not the right place for me.
What have you had happen since hosting the podcast? Is there anything that's become possible?
I am now speaking at events, which I never thought I would do. I don't like being in front of a camera, but it's a great opportunity to reach more people, to inspire more people. I wrote a book last year, hired a coach. We can get back to the mentorship. Became a best-selling author. I threw my own event of doing speaking to women about money. And now partnering with this new company, I truly believe it's a good fit for me, and it's going to give me an opportunity to help people grow their own wealth.
And is that the real estate related one, or is it something else?
Okay. That's what back into real estate.
I mean, it's great that you're able to now take these two passions and experiences that you have and marry them together so it's not that, it's really you're building on your life experience in a lot of ways. So I think others maybe listening to that can think about, you don't have to throw away, 15 years of learning something if there's a way to apply either this transferable skills or the knowledge or the community that into whatever the new thing is. I tend to work, I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur, so I wear a lot of hats, but for my coaching, I often was working with entrepreneurial women over 50 who were looking to grow their impact and income through some kind of new revenue stream. And a lot of times I'd hear from prospects and even clients, like, I don't know anyone. And I'm like, how could you have been, like, you've been a professional for 20, 30 years. Like, people, like, and they have so much knowledge and they want to give and have such a huge impact, but they feel like a novice. So starting over is really hard. And so being able to take, either experience or skills from other places in our life, it makes the starting over feel less like that and more like growing. So it sounds like that's kind of what you've been doing, and it's also what you're now helping others do, is apply what they know into like a wealth building piece. So that's really exciting. The book thing is really cool. I'm also an author, and I really focus on helping people build big launches. I'm a big fan of getting lots of reviews and building pipelines from books. And that also then, it sounds like, has led to more opportunities to speak and have that platform. So it sounds like you're kind of on the cusp of building like that kind of speaking, coaching business, as well as, you've got clearly, it's nice when you're starting a new business to have like a mainstay revenue stream through this company. So what's been most challenging? Like, obviously your upbringing was getting over some of the mindset that comes with that upbringing.
That's it.
When you're around people who only believe a certain thing, there's no way to really envision anything else. So being exposed to new ideas at college, it seems like a real shift for you. But when you're getting started, like, what did you have to bring other people in for? And this might be coming into like the mentor conversation as well, or deciding to hire a coach, or even to hire team members. So how did you start to realize the limits of what you were able to do or wanted to do, and started to develop the community around you?
Yeah, I do believe that coaches and mentors is key. No matter where I'm at in my career, my personal life, I'm always going to have a coach by my side, because they have done something that I haven't done. That's, something that I look for, obviously. But when I wanted to write the book, I needed to find someone who coached people about writing books and had written books himself. So that's what was helping me with the launch of the book. When I did my event and some of the speaking events, I have a coach that helps me with that. And I think that the only true way to grow is investing in yourself and your own education. And the quickest way to grow is hiring a coach or a mentor. You've got to be selective with that person. Don't be afraid to ask for referrals and actually contact those referrals, and making sure that the track record that they have aligns with where you want to go. So, I hired a coach that I thought I wanted to do webinars. We were working through doing these free webinars, and then joined my coaching program. And I just didn't enjoy it. And so, but I wouldn't have known had I not at least given that an effort and hired a coach that could teach me how to do that. I do think it's key. You've got to have a coach and a mentor throughout your life. And as you transition, you might have a different coach or mentor for that transition, and that's okay. But for me, you have to be unselfish. And that means investing in yourself first, taking the time for you first, whatever that looks like in your life. I'm a big believer that I start and end my day reflecting and taking just me time, because I need it. And that's how I can operate. But the coach and the mentor thing is huge.
Yeah. And some people have trouble figuring out how to find mentors. And it seems like you kind of had a knack for that early on. And you talked earlier about finding ways to give back and not just ask for things. So how did you get into that mindset? Because sometimes when you need support from someone, and you're not paying them, like you're paying a coach, maybe that's easier. But if it's not someone you're paying, it's someone you look up to, you might feel like you're just taking. But clearly that's not how you're approaching it. So how do you approach, finding and nurturing that mentorship relationship?
Yeah. So if there's an area that you want to grow, look around. Social media is very easy. Find someone who's looking like they have success in that area. And then ask them, it's very easy now with Zoom. Can we have a virtual coffee? Can I just have 12 minutes of your time? I like picking odd numbers, because then it pattern interrupts people, instead of 10 minutes, 5 minutes, pick a weird, strange number. I don't know why. It just seems to work for me. Maybe because I'm a numbers person. I don't know. But
Although
then
if it
when
was
you
an odd number, it would be 13, but go ahead.
yeah, there you go. There's the math part of it. But when you grab that time for them and you're asking them questions, the other thing I like to end with is, how can I help you? And it gets them to stop for a second, but usually there's something in their life that they're struggling with right now. And it could be just a connection. If they're struggling with marketing and you know someone who does marketing, you're going to connect them together. And when you add value and give back to them, the next time you might have a question, they're more likely to help you because you showed that you care about them too. And finding someone that is not necessarily a paid coach and mentor, but is successful in a field, will also help you grow. Maybe not as quickly as the coach, but it'll definitely get you to that next level. And then just find ways to give back to that person too. I'm always a giver first. And when you ask questions, then it just makes it a little bit easier to figure out how you can help them too.
And do you now find yourself in the role of mentor?
Yes, absolutely. I think I will be for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Was that a kind of a strange shift to realize you had something to give back in that way?
It was a mindset shift for sure. And that's going to be something I think I will also work on for the rest of my life, being in the upbringing that I had. I encourage people to be childlike curious. So think about a child. And if you're a parent, encourage your kids to ask questions, because if they're asking questions about a specific topic, that could be their future career. And I was guilty of that, saying, because I said so, if my daughter asked a question, or, gosh, you have so many questions. But when we shut them down, they stop asking questions and they take that into their adulthood. And you're really kind of keeping them from growing when you're not allowing and encouraging them to ask questions.
So earlier, you already kind of went a little bit down the path of networking, and you shared that great tip about using the phone contact list notes field. And I'm going to credit you and keep talking about this. I always think that there is sort of the inner circle of people that you're going to stay in touch with. And then there's the second and third tiers or layers out, the people that you see once a year at a conference. You worked with 5 years ago, but you haven't had a reason to since. You like each other. That is a very clear start of the relationship. You enjoy each other's company, but how do you nurture and sustain those weaker connections? Do you have any habits, philosophies, practices?
There's only so many times that, how many minutes that you have in a day. So I don't believe necessarily in focusing on people that aren't in those first couple circles like you talked about, because the majority of my business is going to come from those circles, and I can teach and impact them, and they can reach out, and that's how we reach further people. But I do a lot of just quick videos on Instagram and Facebook. And I think when people see it and they're curious and they come back into my world, then I get back into fostering that relationship. But I don't have like major email campaigns or text message campaigns that reach all of those other people. I'm really focused on those first couple of circles, because that's where I know they kind of already have that like and that trust, and I can impact them quicker and easier than maybe some of those outer bands. And so I don't necessarily have a plan in place where I reach those people I haven't been in contact with in some time.
Do you ever host any kind of in-person gatherings, or did you before the pandemic disrupted everything?
I've done one, and that's it. I like going to events. I always say this too. I like going to house parties where people are hosting for dinner and then I get to leave. I don't necessarily enjoy putting that together and having that type of aspect of my career. I'm much better just attending and building relationships.
So you want to know all the conveners so you can go to all their events, because they're going to do them no matter what. Yeah, I'm the convener. I love it. And for me, the big shift was I had a very in-person focused business. I was speaking at conferences about networking at conferences, and March 2020 came along, and I wrote this blog post, 9 ways to network in a pandemic, and number 3 was to host a virtual happy hour. And that night, I'm like, it's like Thursday, the March 12th. I'm like, I should probably do one of these things, and I hosted a virtual happy hour on March 13th, and my life changed. I mean, I got better and better and better at using Zoom. My last book is all about how to leverage Zoom and low tech solutions for leveraging Zoom. So, I think convening now looks different for me than it did 5 years ago. Like I assumed we had to all geographically be located, but now we have podcasts being more prevalent, and you can record videos, which allows people to meet you and see who you are and share that on social media. So it sounds like you're putting yourself out there and reminding people of your value and the ways you contribute to the world. So we're about to get to my favorite wrap-up question. Before we do, we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsor. Okay, so I always want to know, like, if we could reconnect to the year from now, and I hope we stay in touch. And I suddenly, or you suddenly realize, hey, it's been a year since we did that interview. I'm going to want to ask you what you're celebrating. Like, what's taken place in that previous year worth toasting? So what are you most looking forward to in the year ahead? Personal, professional, both, all of the above?
Yeah. So professional, with the new partnership that I have, my goal is focused on creating $1 million in passive income for my clients. So I'm focused on how I can help other people. On a personal level, my daughter will be out of college. Thank goodness for that cost being off my budget. And I'm going to get back to traveling.
Amazing. I mean, there's so many things to celebrate on that. I can't wait to celebrate all of that. I'd love to hear a little more about the work you do helping people invest in real estate, because I think people listening might be interested to learn more, that's even a possibility to get someone to guide them through that process. So what does that service look like?
Yeah, so two things. We have two funds. One of them is a tax lien fund where you are putting money into the fund and we guarantee 22% return every year. And the reason why we can do that is because we have a whole team that knows tax liens, and we're specifically going after tax liens and foreclosures and flipping properties. Our team handles that. You're just giving us the money in which to do that. So that's number one. And then the other one, we do more of commercial and development properties. And so that one has a different return on it depending on what we're going to do with you. But it's the two funds, and it's a great way for people who don't want to get into real estate, but want to be in real estate, for them to give us the money, let us handle all of the aspects of doing the real estate. And in return, we're just giving you an interest payment, just like a CD would, but a much higher return.
I'm much higher. I mean, multiples higher. I mean, I'm really proud of the fact that I have a savings that's like 4.3. And I'm like, yes. That was hard to find.
Yeah.
And CDs are just like one or two, like 4.5 or 6. I'm like, it's not worth me putting it into a CD if I'm going to just stay right here. So 22% guaranteed return. I'm very curious to know more. And I think people are going to want to find you and follow your work. So how can people find you and follow your work?
Yeah, so the name is just about the same everywhere. Empower Her Money is the name of my podcast. I'm on Instagram, TikTok. EmpowerHerMoney.com is where you can find me, book a call with me, and I'd love to at least discuss to see if you have any money questions. I do answer all of my social media myself, so if you have a money question, send me a message. I'm more than happy to help.
Fantastic. We're going to put all those links in the show notes, as well as we've got your YouTube here, your book, your podcast. We'll put all the links and show notes at ontheschmooze.com. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into Empower Her Money podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, share this podcast, and leave a review wherever you are tuning in.